In this video, I'm going to show you how to complete the square. First up, we have all of the steps with completing the square and some tips of some commonly made mistakes for each step. So if we have an equation in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, what we want to do first is move c to the right side of the equal sign and ax squared plus bx to the left. If a is not equal to 1, we want to divide all terms by a. If you end up with fractions, keep them as fractions, not decimals, and you'll see why later. Next, you're going to find b over 2 squared. B is always attached to x, not x squareds, no matter what order they are in, but you will want to arrange them ax squared plus bx just to keep things straight. Next, you're going to add that b over 2 squared to both sides. Write this out. Don't try to simplify it in your head. Simplifying in your head is what often will mess people up with completing the square. Then you'll simplify the right side of the equal sign, again, adding, keeping your fractions. Then you're going to factor the left side of the equal sign. If you struggle with factoring or you're dealing with fractions, it will always be in the form x plus b over 2 equals a number. Then you're going to rewrite the left side of the equal sign as a square, so it's always going to be in that form x plus b over 2, but this time with the square. Then you're going to take the square root of both sides. Remember that a square root is always plus and minus. And then finally, you're going to solve for x. For solving for x, you're going to split it into two fractions, just like we do for quadratic formula. One is the adding and one is the subtracting. So let's see what this looks like in action for a couple of different problems. So we have our problem here, 2x squared plus 5 equals 0. So the first thing I'm going to do, let's do 2x squared plus 8x plus 5 equals 0, is I'm going to move c to the right side of the equal sign and ax squared plus bx to the left. Now, ax squared plus bx are already on the left, so there's nothing that I have to do there, but I do need to move this 5, so I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides, and I'm going to drop this down here, 2x squared plus 8x equals -5. Next, a does not equal 1, a equals 2, so I'm going to divide everything by 2. So that 2 is going to cancel. I get x squared plus 4x equals, and I'm going to leave this as -5 halves because it can't be simplified. I would want to check my my fractions if you're not great with simplifying. So -5 halves is just, or -5 divided by 2 is just -5 halves. All right, now I'm going to find b over 2 squared. So b is this 4. And I'm going to do this off to the side here. So I'm going to do 4 over 2 squared. So I can just plug that straight into my calculator. 4 over 2 squared gives me 4. I am going to add that 4 to both sides. So this 4 is this that I'm going to add to both sides. So I'm adding 4 to both sides. I am going to drop that down. So x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals -5 halves plus 4. So again, this 4 is coming from here, that b over 2. I am going to simplify the right side of the equal sign, so this stuff is going to get simplified. So x squared plus 4x plus 4 stays the same. I'll go to my calculator to do this. So negative 5 halves plus 4, it's not 7, is 1.5, but I'm going to leave it as that 3 halves in the corner here. So equals 3 halves, and you'll see why as we get further along. Next, I am going to factor the left side of the equal sign. So I am factoring this. And remember that tip at the top there? If you're not great with factoring, it's always going to be in this form, x plus b over 2 times x plus b over 2. So I'm going to rewrite that down here. And remember that b is 4, so 4 over 2 would be 2. So I'm rewriting this as x plus 2 equals 3 halves. Next, I'm going to rewrite this as a square, and this was the whole point of completing the square, was so that we could do this specific step. This is the whole point of this. And the reason for that is we can now take the square root to cancel it out rather than having to use the quadratic formula or factor, and we figure out we can't factor it. This is the whole point here. And I'm going to rewrite this. We'll do orange. So take the square root of both sides. That is this square root. So we've got x plus 2 equals, and this is plus or minus, and in this case 3 halves, the square root of 3 halves does not come out nice, so we're going to just do that. So square root of 3 divided by 2 gives me 1.22474, and just like on quadratic formula, we'll just take it out to 4 decimal places. So 1.2247. And then final step is solving for x. And I'll put this in red. So to solve for x, I am going to subtract 2 from both sides. Here's another part that if people are going to mess up on completing the square, this is it. So I want to pop that -2 in front here and then have my plus or minus 1.2247 so that it looks like my quadratic formula. My quadratic formula was similar to this, except that it's not being divided here, but that's where this comes from, is I'm popping that in front. I'm keeping this stuff in the back. Then I'm just going to split this into my 2 little equations. So x equals -2 plus 1.2247 and x equals -2 minus 1.2247. And this, it's kind of an ugly green now, but that's where this is coming from. Finally, I'm just going to go ahead and do that addition and subtraction. So I'm going to get x equals, I'm going to do -2 plus 1.2247 gives me negative 0.7753. And negative 2 minus 1.2247 gives me negative 3.2247. So those are my final answers here. Ooh, did not want that. There we go. So that's one example of using completing the square. That's when we don't get a nice number at the end. We've had to go through every single step. We had to move our C to one side. We had to divide, all of that. Now let's look at a different type of example. So this one, we've got x squared minus 3x equals 10. Now, this is A, this is B. There's no C next to that x. My constant, my C, has already been moved over to the right-hand side of the equal sign, so I do not have to do anything at this step. Next, there's actually no coefficient in front of that x squared, so there's nothing that I do in this step either. So I'm going to go straight on to finding b squared, and let's write this x squared minus 3x equals 10. And actually I'm going to put that there. Okay, so b over 2 squared. This is b. So I'm going to do negative 3 over 2 squared. I can go straight to my calculator, so negative 3 over 2 squared. And I am going to keep that as a fraction, so 9 over 4. And then that's what gets added to both sides here. And you always add in this step. All right, next up, we are going to simplify the right side of the equal sign. So I'm going to do x minus 3x plus 9/4 equals, so we'll do 10 plus 9/4. Gives me 49/4. Next, I'm going to factor the left side of the equal sign. So this is that always x plus b over 2. This is particularly helpful in this case because b is 3 and it does not factor nicely. It has to be a fraction, so this b over 2 is going to be negative 3/2. Let me make sure, use the same color. I didn't actually use a color here, so let's do purple. Okay, do purple down here. So this x minus 3/2 in this case because it is negative equals 49 over 4. So that is coming from here. Now I'm going to rewrite the left side of the equal sign as a square. So x minus 3 over 2, x minus 3 over 2 squared equals 49 over 4. Oops. That's what I wanted. Okay, take the square root of both sides. So this is where I'm square rooting, canceling. I get x minus 3/2 equals, and make sure you include that plus and minus. We'll do 49 over 4, so square root 49 over 4, so 7/2. I'm going to solve for x by adding 3/2 to both sides. And that 3/2 I want to pop out in front. So I've got x equals 3/2 plus and minus 7 over 2. Okay, and final step, split into my two mini equations. So we're going to get x equals 3/2 plus 7/2, and x equals 3/2 minus 7/2. Okay, so 3/2 plus 7/2 gives me 5. And 3/2 minus 7/2 is -2. So those are my final answers for this second problem. Again, this green becomes our plus and our minus. So that gives you an idea of how to complete the square in two different situations. One where you've got to do all of the steps and you end up with a decimal at the end. One where you don't have to do all of the steps and end up with a nice set of numbers at the end.